Welcome to the After Dark podcast, the podcast in which Anthony leads his unknowing friend Konrad by the hand through TV shows. Will Konrad like them? Will Konrad hate them? Will Konrad predict what's going to happen, or will he be lost in the dark? Find out now, only on the After Dark podcast.
Hello, and welcome to the After Dark podcast. I'm Anthony James, and that's Konrad.
Hello.
That's him. I haven't said that's him in a while. That's him. Well, Konrad, how are you this week?
I'm good. I'm glad that we've returned to saying that's him, just in case any of our listeners didn't realise that I was Konrad and there wasn't just a silent third party involved in the recording who sits in the corner judging everything.
Maybe one day, Konrad, when we're big shots, we'll have a producer in the corner.
Can you imagine?
I will have to say that's him and just point at you.
Yeah, well, we can acknowledge producer Jeff or whatever the name.
His name is Jeff. I'm sorry that joke shouldn't be in my mind, but I do teach at a secondary school, and it is in my mind all the time because that meme is still about. Even would you believe?
I don't think I know what that meme is actually.
It's from what's that? Channing Tatum and Jonah Hill. 21
Jump Street.
It's from 22 Jump Street, and
right.
Yeah, and Channing Tatum's trying to put an accent on. And because he's no good at being undercover or whatever, so they say, "What's your name?" And he goes, "My name is Jeff." And he can't. It's just like a nothing accent. There's no accent whatsoever. He's just saying or doing a weird voice.
Are teenagers into 22 Jump Street?
They're into memes? That's what I'll tell you. They're into memes.
I see. Okay.
And the "My name is Jeff" meme was a big one. That was a big one.
If you're a teenager, get in touch and let us know how you feel about the 22 Jump Street meme.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Okay, so this week we are back with the Crestwood crew. Before we get into that, though, can I tell you to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already? The Culture Cave is what we're called. We do lots of podcasts. We also do, every now and then, reviews and video essays and that sort of thing. There's a little bit of a spice to throw into the mix. As well, guys, if you want to subscribe on audio apps, we are on all good audio apps. The ones that don't like to let us keep our content, we don't put it on there. Also, could you send us an email at adpodmail@gmail.com if you want to talk to us. If you want to ask Konrad a question, there will be questions underneath a little pinned comment under this video, which you can ask questions to Konrad as well. There's a t-shirt link in the description if you want to get that. There is also a link to the Discord if you want to get into chat about the OA, chat about Dark. Just to remind you guys, we are going to be covering Dark again very, very soon. Obviously, Konrad and I are going to be on Dark discussions soon, but also Emmett, who you may have seen on the channel covering Sisyphus, The Expanse, Star Trek, he is going to be on the After Dark podcast for 3 special episodes where he is going to be going through Dark one season at a time. Konrad and I like the idea of bringing people through Dark, just like I brought Konrad through Dark, but I don't know if we want to do maybe one day, but not anytime soon, to do a whole episode by episode through again. So we're going to make Emmett binge it week to week to week. And then we'll do our next show, which we're thinking is going to be Westworld. And then maybe after Westworld, we'll get someone else to binge it. We'll find someone else. So that's what
just pull people off the street. That's the next step after Emmett.
My hope is that eventually we're just running around going, "Who hasn't seen Dark?"
Line up.
Line
up and we'll do
there's
all
a lot of them. Unfortunately, there are a lot of people who haven't seen Dark. So, okay. Thanks very much for listening, guys. Let's get into the episode. I thanked you before we started. Don't. That wasn't me saying goodbye. But
preemptive thanks.
Yeah, let's get going.
Yeah, let's do it.
Oh, let's break it. Damn.
Okay, so this episode was a return to the filmmaking of old, season 1. Lots of blues. This dimension is lots of blues. Lots of long, slow shots. We start off with them on the side of a road. The Crestwood 5 plus Steve's girlfriend. I don't like referring to her as Angie. Angie, she has a name in her own right, of course. So they're on the side of the road, and they are broken down, arguing about that they should have brought Angie's dad's new truck.
Yeah, Steve demonstrating a kind of very deliberate self-interest in the early stages of this episode to ultimately be juxtaposed against a lack of self-interest, we'll say, in the second half of this episode after things happen. I will start this episode off by saying as soon as I saw the title was Mirror Mirror, I had two thoughts. My first thought was of the De La Soul song "Me, Myself, and I wrote down the first 4 lines of that in my notes just because it's a good song. You should go listen to that. The second thought was BB-8 traveling, mirrors, televisions, yeah, and then immediately in the first shot she's in it, and I was like, fuck. Like, so, like BB-8 did not in fact travel through that television, as it turns out.
No, she didn't. Unless we're in a universe or dimension which is exactly the same as the old one.
Yeah. A mirror world, if you will.
Yeah, I will say, first thing that came to my head was Snow White. What's very interesting about the fact that came to my head is that apparently that is, that whole Mandela effect stupid nonsense, right? So
yes.
Apparently that's a Mandela effect because mirror, mirror on the wall is what everyone says, but it's actually magic mirror on the wall.
Yeah. Well, do you know why that is? Because the De La Soul song starts with "Mirror, mirror on the wall, tell me, mirror, what is wrong? Can it be my De La clothes, or is it just my De La song?" So, there you go. I got the lines into the episode. Yeah, but that's why everyone thinks it's Mirror, mirror, because De La Soul fucked it up in that song in the 80s.
Oh, really? That makes sense to me. Actually, that makes a lot of sense to me. So obviously, I was thinking of Snow White, which actually ties back into a conversation we were having on the Best Movie podcast ever a few weeks ago about women sleeping in the forest, but.
It does, yeah.
All right, okay, so Steve's looking for cell phone service. Eventually, someone comes in a nice old vintage Ford pickup.
Yeah.
Isn't it really
I thought
great?
This was Francis McDormand, to be honest.
Yeah.
When this truck turned up, there's a kind of... first off, there's a lovely tracking shot of Steve and Angie to the rest of the boys in BB-8, then back to Steve and Angie. Lovely bit of camera movement there. Then the truck shows up, and the woman in it, to be honest, doesn't look anything like Frances McDormand, but obviously the Oscars have recently happened, and she was on the brain, and I was like, is that Frances McDormand? As it turns out, they didn't quite get her, but they got someone who looks a bit like her, and in another universe could have been played by Frances McDormand, I'll say.
Yeah, it's true. I will say, when I see scenes like this, where they're getting these cool old cars, like this is a really cool old Ford pickup, I'm sure car enthusiasts would know the exact model. But it was in modern day, and they get in this really pristine classic car, and you look around to the rest of the cars, they're all modern cars, and I'm like, aren't these characters bloody lucky that the one that stopped for them had the cool car? It always sort of reads to me like, the production design's like, right, let's get the cool car, we'll put them in the car, but then it's like it's always the car. I'd love to see that car drive past while they're in like a brand new.
That's the one that doesn't stop for them, and they have to go into a
Dodge
Prius
truck, exactly. Yeah. But yeah, anyway, I like that. It sort of it gives a real Americana feel, doesn't it? Having those old cars in there.
So there's I think tonally, this is kind of like just a minor dressing to the tones of the episode. This choice of car here, I think, but as we'll get into in a second, I'm sure there's a brief musical interlude after they get into this very nice pickup, and it very much put me in mind of kind of like a mid-2000s indie comedy with like Neutral Milk Hotel playing in the background, and that kind of like twangy indie guitar sound very much in the score very much returns throughout it, and it feels this entire episode feels like it's eulogizing something, and it doesn't become clear until the end what it is eulogizing. As I was going through it, I was like, okay, I'm pretty sure BB-8 is going to travel at the end of this, because it feels like this whole episode is this kind of sun-dappled, nostalgic view of these characters' relationships with each other as they get to the point where they will leave each other, presumably forever. And obviously it doesn't quite end the way I thought it was, but I think definitely the way it's presented, the way it's shot, the kind of emotional notes it's hitting is definitely designed to do that. So this is kind of like... Britt Marling does Garden State is how I felt about this. How I felt about this episode, and to be honest, she did it very well.
Yeah, and I think that actually speaks to the slight difference in our age. Like, I think you were thinking of that sort of indie Neutral Milk Hotel. When I was watching it, I was actually thinking of like Sweet Disposition. You know that one? I can't remember who does it. It was in a lot of films like around 2010.
Okay.
I think it's an Australian band, but I'm not 100% sure. let us know in the comments. But but yeah, always need that engagement, guys.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think there's like 3 years between us or something, and sometimes it rears its head, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, it's like the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. Like between that like there's like kind of God's hand and Adam's hand, and between that lies the gulf of difference between us.
Yeah.
Because I could reference Neutral Milk Hotel and be like, yep, I was around in the early 2000s. I know indie bands.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas I was still a little scrub.
Yeah.
10-year-old scrub, not only caring about Aussie rules and football. All right, and wrestling, of course. Let's not forget that. Okay, so they're in the thing. They get into the diner. Now, I like this diner scene. I don't know. It's not the best scene ever in the show, but I actually just quite like being in this diner with them. And like there's a couple of big things happen. So first of all, Angie is listening to Steve go on about the fact that BB-8 is going to travel and does she even want to go and stuff. And Angie's like, "Well, sorry, you're not the chosen one."
I really like her passive aggression in that she's clearly quite angry that Steve is so enthusiastic about leaving this world behind because to her that's effectively a rejection of the relationship that they built together, which I think is fair enough, to be honest.
Well, in this case, it is very much fair enough. But if you think about, like, if you took it down to a small, like in a relationship, little aspects of jealousy coming up in terms of someone saying, "Oh, I'm," say like, "Oh, I want to go hang out with my friends here. I want to do this," and you're almost like sort of like, does that mean I'm no fun to hang around? But it's like they've taken this to the nth degree where it's like, oh no, he's literally saying that he wants to leave this dimension.
Yeah. Well, and the OA, yeah, exactly. So there's that, and also the OA is essentially like the perfect ex in this situation where Steve just can't stop talking about her, and Angie constantly feels like she's competing with a ghost, which can't be much fun.
Well, I could see Steve reminiscing about like the time in the bath, where she rejected me. It could have been so different. I could see Steve really thinking about that.
He utterly lacks tact, so I could definitely see him doing that.
Exactly. Okay, so Steve actually says, well, if we just do the movements, we're doing the movements, I may as well just jump at the end anyway. And Angie basically does well and scolds him here and be like, they said it's only safe for BB-8 to go.
Yeah. Yeah, he's reckless. I spent most of this episode actually trying to figure out why it was only safe for BB-8 to go. I still don't really know what they mean by that, but Steve is definitely, he's got a head full of steam here and he just wants to leave. And I think by the end of the episode he seems to have calmed slightly in that regard, but I still think his mind is made up.
Yep, exactly. I think in the next little bit that happens is Jesse reveals what he's been searching. I kind of liked this as like a crescendo to Jesse's character because he has been the one sort of driving the searching into OA's past and all.
Yeah.
Well, I know French and Steve were well involved as well, but there had to be something somewhere where that went. Only, and it actually is eventually. I know it did lead to them questioning the story a lot. But it's actually now eventually led to them getting a little grain of something that they can go and follow, which we all know is probably going to be the correct grain to follow.
Yeah. So I think how he gets to it is a little bit implausible. This idea that like Jesse looked up every copper mine in North America when Hap
it was 500,000.
In the last season there's like 500,000 of them. It's like, did you really, Jesse? Like that seems like they've kind of walked back their
logic is overrated. Logic is overrated, Konrad.
It's true. Fair point. That's like a bulletproof argument against any qualm I may have with this show. But yeah, that rang a bit hollow to me. But then finding the Treasure Island hospital felt a lot more believable to me. There's not going to be that many. There can't be that many like massive suspension bridges in America to begin with. One that's like on a coast with a suspension bridge in view. That's the kind of thing where I was like, oh, that's cool detective work. Whereas the copper mines, I was just like, I don't think you did look up every copper mine in the country, to be honest.
Yeah, he was actually just trying to have a little preamble before he said, listen, I found this hotel. Don't know how I did, but this hospital. And he's like, how could I lead into that? Like he's like planning his speech to them. They're on to Treasure Island. Which we know will put them in the same place. I know in a different dimension, but in the same place as Prairie and the gang. They'll be in the same vicinity. So and we also know that when people traveled, now I don't know if you remember this, but we know that when people traveled the first time, so when Hap traveled, they sort of were all together. So like they were all in this thing together. So for example, they were in the circle. So Scott and Renata and all them, they came into the other dimension in the same position they were, not geographically, but around each other. So that would make that immediately. Whenever I saw this, I started thinking to myself, "Hang on a minute. Does that mean if people travel at the same time but in different direct dimensions, they also go into the same?" So, for example, like in my head when I first saw this, now it ends very soon, and I'm not even going to say whether we know this or not, but my mind was like, right, if BB-8 travels, does that mean that if she's like right next to Prairie in the second dimension we've seen, and they both travel, but they travel both into a third dimension at the same time, they'll like appear next to each other? You know what I mean? So it's a real like 3D chess way to think about it. But I think that the idea of like spaces in this episode and the idea of location was very much highlighted, and I think it's not a coincidence that they have traveled in relation to each other into the same place again. Like Prairie and the ambulance,
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure whether it's a case of a kind of more nebulous force driving people within dimensions to kind of occupy similar spaces that then allows them to travel, or whether it is something more kind of arbitrary than that. Like when you travel, you just kind of appear there, or
well, I don't mean appear. I mean like appear in the mind of a person who's there.
Yeah,
but the dimension you go to, if there's two people traveling at the same time, like the five traveled in the circle with Hap, if they're traveling at the same time together, then in the same place, then they would travel to a dimension where everyone's in the same place. Now I don't know if that's true. I think maybe the introduction of Elodie is probably going to throw that all out the window, because she's obviously doing it at a higher level with the little robot things. So we'll know. We'll find out, I'm sure. But that's
or not, as the case may be.
Yeah, guys, that's an example of me throwing some of my own ideas into the mix here. If you just don't like me doing that, let me know. Okay, a couple of people in the comments last week said that they don't mind if I do it because the OA is a special case because it does end in a few episodes.
Yeah, well, there you go. You've got carte blanche.
I can do what I want.
I will say, like, for the last thing on this scene, absolutely classic narrative device of group of kind of runaways are in a diner when a news report, or in this case an Amber Alert, comes on the television with their pictures on it, and suddenly it heightens the tension of their entire narrative arc. Never happens when they're like driving or somewhere where they don't need to worry about being immediately seen. It's always in a diner or a bar or somewhere where they could be spotted.
Yeah, I got 2 points on this actually. My first point is when I've seen this episode like 4 times, but when I watched it this time, I don't know why, because it came up and it said Michelle, but in my mind, I'm like this. It's Buck, it's Buck. He is a boy. He is a man. It's so ingrained in my mind that when it came up and said Michelle's missing, I was like, they're getting TV signals from the other dimension. But then I was like, oh no, okay, it says Michelle, and then they have like Buck in quotation marks. Now, this is my second point. The idea of like dead naming someone to the point where like it'll trigger the dysmorphia, and it's you shouldn't do that. It's obviously horrible to do, and we know Steve basically did that. So my thing is, though, the idea of doing that, in my opinion, it's more offensive to do what this news broadcast did and say Michelle and then in quotation Buck Vu. Yeah. And I'm like, you're basically saying, like, instead of not being able to accept their new identity, you're saying that it's basically like the name Madonna. It's like me deciding I'm going to call myself Flash Cool Guy. And like having that in quotation marks on you, like it's just a name that I've just adopted for fun. Well, it's like you being called Konrad. Like
exactly.
If you repeat your real name, like first name Konrad, last name, that's okay. That's like a nickname. It's sort of you're trying to put it on because you're trying to be they're implying that it's like a stage name.
Yeah, like
Buck.
a persona or
And,
something.
and I
yeah.
actually think that's more offensive. Well, obviously,
yeah.
I'm not the one to say if it's more offensive or not. But in my opinion, it feels like it might be, because it's like it's really saying the Buck is the fake one. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, and also, I mean, from a pure like practicality standpoint, like if there is an Amber Alert issued for a missing child and that child is transgender, then adults approaching that child looking to make sure they are safe would presumably want to be approaching them with the correct like gendered pronouns and the correct name, rather than just being like, oh, you're Michelle. Like Buck is far less likely to respond to that, because that's clearly either someone being deliberately hurtful or someone who's I don't know, like operating on outdated information. But yeah, so I was just like, that's a weird way to report that, especially in, was it 2018 this series came out?
2019.
2019, yeah. So especially in 2019, where it's like you've got no excuse for that. Just like, his name is Buck. Just call him Buck. Like if you must acknowledge the fact that he is like transgender, you could maybe put a little addendum underneath it or something. But seems irrelevant, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly. On the search for a Joey Styles, homosexual, go look for him. Like, why do you? Come on, just say who it is. Put a picture up. Yeah,
it's just it's needless details.
Yeah,
but I mean, well, maybe this is Britt Marling taking a shot at the 24-hour news cycle, and they need to like kind of like source up every single story that they have, even a goddamn Amber Alert.
Yeah. Well, see if I go missing. Put it out. Anthony James, first book he read was Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone.
Yeah.
Very important.
If I go missing, I do wish to be referred to as Flash Cool Guy. That's my that's my. I will only respond to that, unfortunately.
Okay, I'll remember that then. Okay, so BBA is having, now. I'm someone who suffers from this as well. I don't have the. Personally, I don't have like the impending travel coming up, but BBA is having suffering from some extreme entropy here, and she's like really worrying about having to die, and what does it mean, and where's she going to go? Is her current body going to die? And maybe she says, maybe that's why it's only safe for me to go, because all of you are too young to die.
It's a valid concern. It's nice to have it voiced by a traveller, because, to be honest, as we said before about Prairie, for all of Prairie's empathy, she doesn't seem particularly concerned about Nina or what has happened to Nina. And I think BBA is probably even more empathetic, or certainly more considerate than Prairie, because she's asking these kinds of questions, and obviously it's very stressful for her because there's no one there to answer it. She might jump and her body might just fall down dead at that moment, and I think it's a valid concern.
Oh yeah, 100%. Come on, you have no idea where you're going. Like, also she's having these weird dreams as well, so she knows something freaky's going on. So, yeah, I'd be feeling the same. Okay, so they smash all their phones.
We get a brief mention that from French before this as well, that they've crossed state lines, so the FBI are probably involved.
Oh, here we go.
Wonder who that could possibly mean.
Yeah.
I will like just say as well, like, I love the way that is it Phyllis Smith, the actress who plays BBA? I love like the dawning horror as she realizes that none of the kids have phoned their parents, and it's just like, you have pushed me into an impossible position here, you little bastards. She's just like, well, now I need to travel because I'm a wanted criminal who's I've kidnapped a bunch of kids. So thanks, guys.
So stupid. But see, if it was me, right? See the whole idea of smashing the phone.
Yeah.
I think what I would do is I would go out into the car park of the diner and sneak it under a chair in someone's car.
Oh, that's a great idea. You plant the tracker on somewhere else and send them on a wild goose chase.
Yeah, exactly. Just smashing the phone, like.
Or chuck it into the back of a pickup truck or something and be like, yeah, good luck, fuckers. I'll be in Arizona by morning. Like.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's exactly what I would do. But Jesse doesn't want to give his phone up, but he eventually has to. Steve just takes it and smashes it. Yeah, and Jesse's
Well, I mean, he doesn't think anyone's looking for him, which
yeah, exactly.
I feel like I found Jesse's arc in this episode very believable and very sad. But I do feel like his sister. I know that the one time we've seen them together, their relationship isn't presented as all that wholesome. You know, they're basically taking drugs together and watching TV, or drunk together and watching TV. But I feel like it wasn't implied that she just doesn't care about him at all. Like, I feel like they've kind of dropped that aspect of his familial life for the purposes of making a point to a certain extent.
Yeah, it might also be that, like, you know, for the longest time after, you know, his parents, his mom died, and you know, it might have been that him and his sister were like a little team, and now that his sister's, you know, got a girlfriend now, and sort of maybe he feels like, you know, it's just like a natural response that like he no one has time for him anymore. So
yeah,
even though his sister might still be saying to him, no, like, you know, come and watch this with me, or let's go do some drugs together, he probably doesn't. Maybe he's not at the stage where he realizes that yet. He's not mature enough. But also, like, you know, like mental health problems don't always, you know, someone could have 100 loving people in their life and still suffer from horrible mental health problems.
That's true.
You know, so it's and when they suffer from those mental health problems, they could say things like, no one cares about me, or no one's looking for me, even though it's not true, because that's how they genuinely feel. So it is something you have to think about. What I'm going to say is, though, I don't think taking drugs on a public bus is probably the way to go.
No. So it's not going to have the best repercussions. Insofar as taking drugs will ever have good repercussions.
Yeah. Well, I get travel sick as it is. Like I just barely like. The only way I can avoid travel sickness is by driving. Like if I'm driving, so you know that's why I don't think
pop a couple of Valium before you drive. And
yeah, I don't take the bus because the driver doesn't like me throwing him out of the chair. Like so, I would need to like honestly like I get travel sick really bad. So I wouldn't even like the idea of being on a bus in the first place. Drugs on the bus, would that improve the travel sickness or revert it? I don't know.
Depends if it makes you pass out or not. But I mean, as we see in the case of Jesse, it doesn't help until the Neutral Milk Hotel starts playing again to indicate that Steve is about to do something nice. Gives Jesse a shoulder to sleep on. But he doesn't look like sleeping.
Lovely fellow, that's Steve. I'll tell you that.
It's not when he wants to be.
When he wants to be. Okay, here's a question for you.
Go on.
It's not really a question. Every single time that I see a film or a show where it's a big deal for characters to see the ocean for the first time, I always think to myself, whoa, actually, that's a way that I'm lucky, which I didn't realize I was. You know, like imagine, like America's so huge. Imagine not seeing the ocean till you were like 18 years old.
Well, okay, so I'm gonna answer your non-question with a question that I had. So I'm trying to think. I mean, I've flown over oceans before, but I don't know if I've ever actually been on the coast of an ocean, technically speaking. You will have, or maybe you will have, being in you know, Ireland or Northern Ireland, because you've got a coast to the Atlantic. But England, like the south of England, doesn't really have a coast to an ocean. So I wasn't sure if I could count, you know, going to the south of England where it's the Channel.
It does count for me, because, and I'll tell you why. It counts for me because I think it was very much implied in this that they'd never seen a beach.
Yeah, that was my understanding as well. That it's just a beach in general, which it is nuts to think you've never seen a beach.
Well, yeah, because I know there was. I can't remember the connection, so I'll just say this. But there was someone who came over on like an exchange program to Northern Ireland, and someone in my connection housed them while they were here. And the first thing they said when they got here is, "Can we go to the beach?" Because they'd never been to the beach before. And like living in Ireland, like you're never anywhere. You know, never more than an hour and a half away from the beach.
So the clue's in the name. It's an island. Like it's
Ireland.
Head in any direction and you will find the beach.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I get your point. Like obviously, I'm from Australia, so I went to a lot of beaches right on an ocean. I went to
because the middle is just a murderous desert. Where no life can be sustained.
Exactly. And if you go to the west coast of Ireland, over to Galway and stuff, like you've got the ocean there as well. So To be honest,
It
with
reminded
you,
me of Charlie in when they go to the Jersey Shore in It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, and he like starts to try and figure out if he can swim to Europe. I was wondering if I don't know who it would be. It's probably Steve. Steve's like really the Charlie of this group in many ways.
Yeah, he is,
If he was going to try and swim to Europe.
Yeah.
Actually, they're in California, aren't they? So swim to Japan. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so BB-8 has a moment with her Uncle Carl. Just reminiscing, nice little. BB-8 is sort of connecting with her roots before.
Yeah.
Maybe going away.
And she, again, so this kind of first off, this is a lovely house. Got real home envy from this, like this kind of beach house. But the sort of beach bathing sequence really brings back again that kind of sun-dappled nostalgia of like a Garden State or a kind of 2003 like indie comedy where it feels like it's deliberately being very nostalgic and very heartwarming because it wants to juxtapose these kind of nostalgic sequences with the heartbreak that is inevitably going to come at the end of this episode. And as you say, we get BB-8 kind of saying her goodbyes or reminiscing, I suppose, with her Uncle Carl and with her cousin, whose name I have forgotten now. I can't remember what her cousin's name is.
Amy.
But, and they're like having a drink and stuff. And it's all kind of... It's a really clever kind of narrative bait and switch because it's making you think, oh, BB-8 is the one who is leaving this group. It's clear they're setting that up, and I still think she will leave this group. I think that seems to be the direction her character is headed in now. I think she will leave this dimension, whether the group comes with her or not. I'm not sure yet. So that's the kind of the natural endpoint that I suspected the episode was heading towards. So it was really cool for them to kind of change course because actually. I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves here, but the way it changes course is really supported by the themes of Jesse's relationships with the rest of the boys and BB-8, in that everyone knows he's struggling. We as an audience know he's struggling, yet he is a side character who is doesn't really get much attention paid to him until this episode, where he's kind of like a co-lead in some respects in this episode. And maybe that's me kind of like making excuses for what has previously been a lack of characterization, but I feel like it really worked to kind of to compound the impact of what happens with Jesse.
Yeah. No, Jesse. This was a real tragedy. This episode for Jesse, and I we'll talk a bit more in detail about it when we get there. But so there was this chat between Amy and BB-8, and I love characters that come in that just ask questions. It's just like, why is no one asking this? Right?
Yeah.
So
she asks good questions. I've got to be honest.
Yeah. So she says, "They seem like good kids. Why are they here?"
Yeah. Why are the cops after you as well? Which is just like a reasonable question, and BB-8 doesn't do a good job of answering it. I like BB-8 as a character. I will say I don't know if she would hold up to intense scrutiny in police custody. She doesn't seem like she can handle pressure very well.
I'm eating a sandwich.
Questioning. Yeah. Yeah. Panics. Puts the phone down.
Yeah. Okay. So what I also like about it is BB-8 starts like going into the detail of what's going on, and I'm just like, if you're in a cult, don't tell anyone about the cult. Like, it's not...
but do not say the word cult. Whatever you do. Yeah. And then they're like, oh, and then she starts like leading into. She's like, oh, they say you're in like a cult with that woman who died, and then she immediately starts off with, well, she didn't really die. It's like, abandon this, she's not going to understand. You cannot begin the explanation for this with, oh, this woman who died isn't really dead. Like, she's just travelled to a different dimension because that is going to make her think you are insane.
Yeah, we're not in a cult. She's just different dimension.
Yeah, you know? She's in a different dimension. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
We do these movements. It's not a cult. So we don't have a symbol. Okay, so then we go to Steve and Angie on the beach.
Yep.
Saying, you really think, like, Steve's like sort of questioning whether BB-8 can do it, and then Angie again just comes in with a question that's just like the truth. It's like, come on, why don't you realize this? And she's like, well, she ran into the cafeteria for you all, didn't she?
Yeah.
It's like, Steve, did you not appreciate that at the time? Like, did you not?
Yeah. And he is. I think this is very true to Steve's character, that he is very self-interested, and self-centered, where he's so fixated on what is immediately in front of him as his goal, which is to travel, that he is growing frustrated with the people around him who will help him do it, and is just kind of forgetting what they've actually done for him already because he just wants to go now. He's very childish in that respect, and I feel like he's kind of always been that way, and seems like he always will be that way, which is frustrating in a good way. You know, it's a believable characterization, but it's also like, for God's sake, Steve. Come on.
It seems like every
Grow
time
up a little.
Every time he takes a step in that he could learn from and could mature with, he always takes 3 steps back. Like,
Yeah.
Okay, so Jesse is talking to Uncle Carl, sort of talking to him about his childhood, and he used to go over the bridge because they're in Michigan, so across the bridge to Canada to see some family. And he talks about a dream as well. Did you read anything into the actual content of what he was saying, or did you just take the emotion of it?
I think I'm trying to think back to what he actually says now because I didn't take notes on it. But I think to me it was more characterization that Jesse is only comfortable opening up about himself to someone who is unresponsive and dying, which speaks to how tragic his relationships with those around him actually are. In terms of what he says, I think I believe that when he speaks about what heaven is like, I think he's saying that with absolute conviction. I should have really seen as someone who tries to analyze where a narrative might be going, when Jesse starts talking about, oh, this is what heaven will be like, and then steals some drugs. In retrospect, I should have been like, oh, he's going to try and kill himself, because otherwise why is he talking about heaven when he's 18 or however old these kids are supposed to be?
I think they're all 18 except for Buck at this stage. At least I hope so, for French's sake.
yeah, otherwise he's in trouble, or well, his friend is in trouble. So it's I don't know if I took too much from his description of what he thinks the afterlife will actually be like, purely because I think he's speaking purely from feeling and belief rather than from experience. But we've seen before in this show that feeling is half the battle when it comes to predicting how things are actually going to go. So maybe there is some truth to it.
Yeah. Okay. BB-8 comes in, sees him. There's a bit of he's a bit mortified whenever she reveals that she's been listening. But then they go and have a chat and sort of talk about if she's going to travel and stuff like that. Any notes on this little sort of it's sunset chat looking out over the ocean? What do you think?
I mean, it's classic imagery of the sun is going down on their relationship, and I think the real tragedy of this scene in particular is that I think if BB-8 had said the right thing, she could have stopped Jesse from killing himself here. But she's an interesting character, BB-8, because she wants to be very caring and nurturing to these kids, but she's not very good at doing like the kind of just low level stuff. Like, she can do the extreme stuff where she needs to go and pay $50,000 to rescue Steve from being sent off to military
run
school.
into a cafeteria with an active shooter in it.
Yeah, exactly. Like, she'll happily do that stuff because she loves these kids, and
maybe
she's
not
very
happily.
brave. Well, yeah, happily is maybe not the right word. Willingly, let's say.
Yeah.
She had a smile on her face when she went into that cafeteria.
Wouldn't it be nice?
That would have been a great backing sound for that scene. It would have changed the tone of it, I think, slightly.
Turn it into Sucker Punch or something.
Oh god, yeah, that's exactly what it would have done. But I think, so doing like the kind of just low level kind of emotional maintenance of these kids is something that she's not very good at. And Jesse here, I feel like I just wanted someone to grab him, like kind of like what Steve did on the bus, I guess, but more so, just grab him and give him a hug and be like, it's going to be okay, it's fine, like, you're allowed to be traumatized by this, you're allowed to feel like you're alone, like, we will get through this together, and not let him go off on his own, because he clearly needs to be around people, even though, well, he needs to be around people because he feels completely alone, even though he might not be. And I think the real tragedy of this scene is that she doesn't, or is unable to do that, and lets him go off on his own to kill himself.
Yeah, and she realizes what her dreams are telling her too late. Her dream was telling her that Jesse needs help, because obviously we know that her brother committed suicide.
Yeah.
So therefore, the fact that it was her brother saying, we need your help, and then it turns around to Jessie, it really was hinting at her that someone close to her, another one, is going to commit suicide, and that's what it was.
Yeah, and it's a shame that she didn't put two and two together soon enough, and it doesn't, based on Jesse's presentation in the dream, where he obviously it's a dream sequence and he's not actually there manifesting himself, but the fact that to her he is kind of like begging for her to help him makes me think that the implication there is that Jesse did not go calmly into the next world, or whatever they kind of, whatever you want to consider the afterlife to be in this version of reality, which makes his death all the sadder. I think that he wasn't at peace with himself when he died, which is really tragic, like for anyone, but particularly for an 18-year-old.
Yeah, he didn't willingly step into the invisible river. Like, he drowned in it, I suppose, is what you could say. Yeah. Okay, so hashtag deep. What do you call it? Hashtag deep. So Jesse does commit suicide, and he is
bloody neutral milk hotel comes back again. I was like, you sons of bitches, you fooled me into what this is gonna. And that was actually the moment where that music comes in. I was like, okay, he's not coming back, because I feel like it would be quite cheap for them to pluck at the heartstrings with the kind of motifs of the musical score during a death scene, only to then have him come back to life. And I feel like they don't tend to write things like this cheaply. I mean, death is pretty uncommon actually in this show when you think about it, or certainly permanent death. So yeah, like
permadeath.
As soon as permadeath, exactly. So when the score returned, I was like, oh shit, Jesse's actually gone.
Yeah, and actually, I didn't even think about this, right? I'm sure he was long gone because he was in there all night after taking the pain medication. But because of how wrapped they are in the movements and their belief, and their belief that it's real, and we understand at this point why they think it's real, because obviously the signs they've had in the house with the clairvoyant and all. But not one of them tried CPR.
Well, I think did French tried it.
Oh,
very briefly.
Well, actually, maybe he did very briefly.
He very briefly did compressions.
But they very
he's cold.
Yeah, they very quickly. Yeah, okay. Well, I'm wrong then. And French is the character to do it. Actually, if you were going to believe like who has their first aid training, it's French. Like he's the one.
Yeah, I mean, and French really is the MVP of this scene, because Buck and Steve start doing the movements and realize they're kind of fucking them up, because I guess the implication is they're too distraught to do them accurately and with quote unquote perfect feeling. And French first tries the chest compressions, realizes Jesse is cold and that CPR is not going to bring him back. So I mean, it's easy to miss, because I think he gives up after less than a minute of doing it. It's like he tries it for a second and then it's like, no, it's not going to work. And then takes charge and steals a car, which I was like, all right, French, good job. Like you're on this, because you guys are already suspected of being kidnapped by BBA and joining a cult. You do not want to be found with a dead body on the beach. Yeah,
exactly. Okay, so they do the movements for a while. BBA joins in, and eventually, like, Buck sort of is overcome with, like, being distraught, and they can't do them properly, and they're just like, they feel like it's not working. So I went through a bit of a journey here. Okay. Because I hadn't seen this episode in probably a few months. Just before we started doing this, I watched the whole series through again. And before that, I hadn't seen it since it was released. So I read something on the subreddit the other day about Jesse. And they think that potentially, like, you know how people on the internet can be so confident in their opinion, right? And they said, now I'm not saying this is false theory, but their reasoning was clearly false, because they said, like whenever the Scott was brought back, it was 2 people doing it. And they said, but, whenever Jesse was brought back, it was the 5 of them doing it. So maybe they actually sent him to another dimension. So I was like, oh yeah, that's a really cool idea. So like the all week I was thinking about that theory. And then when I finally watched the episode, I was like, oh, that person on Reddit was full of shit.
Yeah, it's only two of them doing it.
There's only two at a time doing it. What the fuck are they talking about? Like, you know, they were so confident that it made me start like running wild with
it makes
theories.
you question yourself. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I don't think there's that much to read into this. I think they tried to bring him back. They failed because they were too distraught to do the movements effectively. My bigger question, which I'm sure we'll get to later, is what was Steve doing later? Because I don't understand what his goal was with those movements.
Yeah, so he's doing anything he could to try and save it. Now, I will say that there are some things going on in the world right now that have got people excited for a potential third season of this show. Now,
Oh, really?
that's happened multiple times over the last couple of years. Let me just say that. So it's probably going to come to nothing. But at the end, whenever we do our theory matrix and stuff, at the end of this, we're also going to have a look at stuff. I want to do a part of that podcast where I'm going to show you, I'll talk to you about the times that people thought the show was coming back, and then we'll have a discussion about whether we think it will actually come back.
Oh, okay. That'd be good. / potentially heartbreaking.
Yeah, exactly. But I will say, the reason why I said that is because if the show did come back, I could see the way I would do it, right? I don't think Jesse's consciousness should still be alive. If maybe he'd come back in like a Rachel and Amira type way in a different universe at some point. But I think that you have to keep him dead to have this the way it's affected the rest of these characters and the moment he has to stay dead. What I wouldn't be surprised is if they did bring it back, maybe they got to a point in a particular season 3, season 4, where you actually met an alternate version of Jesse, and the characters think that he is in there somewhere, but he's actually not. You know, I could see that as well.
I think I could definitely see them utilizing the actor again, because they've set themselves up to be able to use these actors in slightly different roles in a really believable and interesting way. But yeah, I agree. I think Jesse, as we know him, should remain dead, because this feels like a very, very important moment for the rest of the cast of characters, or the rest of the boys in BBA, and feels it would be, if they Dragon Ball Z'd this death and had him like wished back using the Dragon Balls in 2 weeks time, I'd be a bit like, oh, that kind of robs that of a lot of its emotional impact.
Yeah, and shows do that, you know. You've got, when you kill a character, you've got a window of time to bring them back where it's okay. Say, you know, there's an episode of Lost where a character dies and then they give him CPR for like ages, and then they give up and they're like, oh my god, he's dead. And then then the main character Jack's like, no, he's fucking not. I'm trying again, and he tries again, and he brings him back. That's a good like 2-3 minutes of suspense. If you go past that and it's just like you just move on to the next scene, and then come back and he's still alive, it's a bit hollow. And that's actually there was a show, I can't remember. Oh yes, I will say, I love the show Babylon Berlin. Absolutely love it. Hardly anything negative to say about it. But there is one part of that show where a character at the end of an episode, it's very clear that they have drowned. They really, really show you them drowning. And then the next episode, it starts with someone pulling them out of the water and giving them CPR. It's like if they had done that straight away in the episode, it really would have felt right. But the fact is, they waited to the next episode, you know, and I was like,
it's just like a cheap cliffhanger at that point.
That
isn't going to get paid off. I mean, listen, I grew up reading comic books, and character death in comic books is nothing but a minor inconvenience for the most part. You know, it was always like a running joke of every time Jean Grey in the X-Men died, how long would it be before she came back to life again? So it's like by those standards, those admittedly low standards, the OA could bring Jesse back in like 3 episodes time, and I'd be like, there's some restraint shown there, really.
Yeah, exactly. All right, okay, so they go to a hotel, or motel, I should say.
Motel, yeah, the Tuxedo Motel, I believe it's called, which
just classy
sounds like
place.
Sounds like a classy place.
I will say, having been to America and done little road trips and stuff around America, let me just say to you, there's nothing more terrifying than sleeping in a fucking motel. I don't know why, like, literally just a door between you and the world. Something about it just doesn't feel right.
That's like, I have seen enough action thrillers to know that if you're going to get killed by gangsters, it's going to be in a motel, because they're going to kick that door open and then they're going to shoot you. There's nothing protecting you from that.
Exactly, and I will say as well, like I went. This is random. This happened in a motel, so it is actually relevant. When we went to Nashville, we got a motel, and we decided to get a pizza because we'd heard that, like, you know, we just arrived, we got to the motel, it's quite late at night. We'd heard that pizza anywhere outside like New York was terrible in America.
Okay.
Obviously, or we
So you
like,
decided to check.
yeah, we did. So obviously, like, Chicago has the deep dish and stuff, but that's not real pizza. It's a soup. But
I'm not getting drawn into this debate with you. I stand with Chicago. I've never had a deep dish pizza, but that looks good to me.
it does look good. Yeah, but it's a classification thing, I think. You know,
I'm like, listen, you're making a rod for your own back here. I would like it to go on the record that I have nothing against Chicago deep dish pizza, and I'm a pizza agnostic. I respect all types of all types of pizza.
I'm on Jon Stewart's side. Go and watch the Jon Stewart clip of him.
Isn't Jon Stewart from New York?
Yeah. But
Yeah, so he's not exactly a neutral party in this this debate, is he?
hang on. But the rest of the world, the New York style pizza is basically what the rest of the world calls pizza. So it's not really a New York thing. It's pizza versus Chicago thing. But so Jon Stewart has a great thing where he like rants about it. But anyway, so we got a pizza in Nashville because we'd heard that pizza outside New York was terrible everywhere. You know, we'll sort of leave an asterisk on Chicago. And I'm not going to lie to you, Konrad. I ate the pizza.
Go on.
And I couldn't finish it. It was disgusting. Like, I'm not even joking you. It was
in what way is it bad, though? Is it just like the topping is bad, or is it like one of the cheap ones you buy and cook in the oven yourself?
No, it wasn't like that. It wasn't a cheap one and cook in the oven. But it was, I don't know. I can't explain it. It wasn't a good pizza. It was like not thick enough and not thin enough at the same time. It was it was like, it wasn't a thin pizza, which like with like the Italian style, but it also wasn't like a thick crust. It was like a weird in between. Yeah. And like the cheese wasn't enough, and like there was also we also got like mozzarella sticks on the side, and like they just tasted like vomit. Like there was, I don't know. This wasn't good. I don't know why.
I don't understand how you. I mean, maybe my standards are really low, but because England doesn't have a. I would say most kind of fast food in England is like a poor imitation of what you can get in America. So maybe my standards are just really low. But most pizzas that you get from places here, I'm like, that was okay. Like, that was a pretty good pizza. So if it's worse than that, I don't know how you make it that bad, to be honest.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying to you. Like, the pizza we have over here is actually... I had pizza in New York as well. Like, we went to a proper... family we know in New York took us to a really good pizza restaurant. It was absolutely brilliant. But the pizza I had in New York... I never thought I'd say this, but the pizza we have in Ireland was closer to New York than Nashville. Like, it's better.
That's great.
Yeah, than
take that, America. Nashville.
Yeah, take that. Okay, so
I mean, Ireland is closer to Italy, so it makes
true.
Sense.
Starts with I as well. So yeah. Idaho is where you want to go for a pizza.
The flag is basically the same as well. To be honest,
yeah, just one color, slightly different.
Change the orange, the shade of the orange a little bit, rearrange them. You're in Italy.
Yeah, and that's why we have such good pizza. You know, it's not quite there. The orange tones within the pizza should maybe be a bit more red to make the flag look the same. But apart from that, it's pretty good. All right. Did you know that's why? I was going to speak absolute bollocks there. I was going to say, did you know that pizza is actually the Italian flag is actually after pizza because green for the herbs and white for the cheese and red for the tomato.
We would get emails. We would get angry emails and comments being like, "How dare you?" But in Italian accents, which I'm not going to attempt here.
Yeah, exactly. It could be something there with fajitas in Mexico too, but we'll not go there. Right. Okay. So, French. They're at go to the motel. French calls our good old friend Ilias Rahim.
Son of a bitch. So it's okay. So there's a couple of things that happen before Ilias turns up that I just wanted to mention. So the first one was Steve is on the beach for what seems like hours and hours and hours doing the movements. Well after Jesse's body has been taken away by the coroners. Second thing is, I didn't recognise the jacket that he picks up from Amy's house. Was that Jesse's? He goes and gets like a jacket with like
it had an American flag on the back.
Yeah, like an American flag. But I didn't recognise it as Jesse's.
Neither did I, to be honest with you. I don't actually know. Maybe he just stole it. Okay,
I was a little bit like, I don't recognise that. So, okay, Ilias shows up. And the first thing that I noticed was he's wearing his goddamn FBI jacket, like a fieldwork jacket. Well, but the thing is with Ilias is that he has led Prairie and Nancy and Abel to believe that he's not really a proper FBI agent. He's basically just a counselor who works for the FBI.
You still have the company jacket.
Well,
like,
I don't think
I don't coach the Gaelic football team in my school, but I've still got a school jumper with the crest on.
Well, see, no, I think, I mean, this is admittedly based mainly on Silence of the Lambs and the X-Files, but, like, my understanding is if you only wear that kind of fieldwork jacket if you are an agent or a special agent, which he has explicitly said he is not to Prairie. So I feel like this is basically just, I mean, it's not a major thing, but to me this was kind of confirming that he has lied to Prairie and Nancy and Abel about his role within the FBI, that he is much more of a law enforcement he is much more involved in this kind of law enforcement part of the FBI than he led them to believe.
Could be, yeah.
And I also I really love the change in lighting between the scenes. So you've got the sort of sun-dappled fading of the light with Steve doing the movements, and then it cuts to Ilias in the motel room, really dramatically lit with like shadow and red light on him. A very sort of stark shift to, you know, suggest that the motives of this character are perhaps darker, perhaps more unclear, and a great kind of, I mean, I've got more to say on this scene, but leads to a great cliffhanger at the end of the episode as well.
Yeah, but I will say, Konrad, could we perhaps be seeing this character in a different light?
Yeah, well, yes, I would say so. Although I still think, I'm not sure about him. Like, he said he's been sent to help her, but the light that we are seeing him in, it definitely is still designed to raise questions about his motivations, despite what he is saying.
But I think if that's what you're saying, I think it's sort of confirmed that he's sort of the Kareem of this world in this episode for me.
Yeah, I think so.
And I think if that's what you're saying, that there is some sort of nefarious undertones still going on, I think you have to say the same for Kareem. And I don't see it there.
Yeah, that is true. I don't know. I feel like Kareem. So it's odd as well though that Kareem doesn't realize his role in the same way that Ilias does. No, not yet.
He did seem to click something when she said, what did the octopus call you? OA, like, what did you call yourself? OA. He seemed to be clicking something there, not as if it like sort of reminded him or a deja vu thing. So there might be something coming there, but not yet, you know.
But I wonder if I wonder if Prairie's brother, it would be really, or OA's brother, I should say. I wonder if OA's brother is kind of at his core a kind of diametrically opposed force to the OA. So where she is kind and empathetic, he is kind of ruthless and driven and focused. And the different characterizations of the brother we are seeing in Kareem and Ilias reflects how aware those people are of the fact that they are carrying the soul of this brother. So in Ilias's case, you know, he's very, I believe what he says when he says, "I'm here to help her," but to me, the way that he's presented kind of makes me think of him like a kind of, he's like a blunt object almost. Like, he will help the OA, but he doesn't really care who he hurts to do it. Whereas Kareem, because he's less aware that that's what he is, he still has some of the aspects of his human character that present him as a better person, which maybe that will fade away as the soul of the brother of the OA comes more to the surface. That's kind of me just spitballing, but I feel like there's clearly a very different presentation and characterization of Ilias and Kingsley Ben-Adir, oh my god, his name. No, the Kingsley Ben-Adir's character. Kareem, that's it. His name just completely went out of my head for a second. Between Ilias and Kareem, which I think is notable. And I'll be interested to see how their characters change, particularly Kareem's, as the show kind of heads towards its conclusion.
Yeah, I think there is some note to that. Like, to be honest with you, because we do have the theme of holding a consciousness within yourself, and it's slowly coming to the surface. That is there already, so it makes sense actually to draw that line of comparison between the brother and the other people who've traveled. So yeah, maybe. Okay, so when they're in the room with Ilias, we have missed a couple of small notes. So we'll go back and have a look at them, right? So first of all, the BBA is sort of talking about that she thinks something is wrong with her. This sort of culminates with her explaining whenever Ilias is there that she feels other presences in the room, and she did when she touched the TV too. So,
I love that they've just glossed over the fact, just to briefly mention that she clearly just broke that woman's TV and then booked.
Yeah.
Just just imagine them all like hightailing it out while the woman is like, "Come back here and replace my television."
Yeah, exactly. Well, they're all very. It's like most of this group are very sort of mannered. I said mild mannered. That's literally a quote from Robin Hood Robin Hood the cartoon.
Okay.
Mind your maddles. Mind your maddles. I accidentally actually said maddles instead of manners there.
Well, we'll call it a reference, a hilarious reference.
Yeah, it was a reference. Okay. Anyway, so my point is they're all quite mild mannered and sort of very not really over the top people. Steve's the exception, I think. So when you actually look back at this trip they've had, they've broken someone's TV. One of them's died. They stole a car. They stole
two cars, actually, because I think the implication is they kind of stole Angie's dad's car as well.
Yeah. Killed an animal. They've broken a mirror. 7 years bad luck. And I wouldn't actually be opposed to someone coming up with some sort of theory that they are going to build in something about bad luck with the mirror being broken. Like, I wouldn't be opposed to someone that as well. It seems like a type of show which might touch upon that sort of thing. But yeah, so it's interesting when you look back at their trip that they have actually done that. But so they talk about the rooms, they talk about spaces being connected. We sort of talked about that a little already. Yeah. I like the fact that Ilias was like said to French, you remember where we met? And he was like, yeah, I do. He's like, you never asked me why I was there.
Yeah. Like, first question.
Well, I want to know how he got in. Did he have a key? Did he go through the same window?
He went through the same window. is my guess. And he doesn't really say either. Like he kind of talks around it, talking about as you said there, dimensions connected through spaces. You're not. I like the quote. You're not losing your mind. You're finding new spaces inside of it.
That was
which
great.
I thought was very cool. But yeah, it doesn't. He didn't really lay out exactly what he was doing in Prairie's home, except that presumably there are other people in that home that he is able to sense and perhaps communicate with. I'll be interested to see if we get anything more explicit on that in the coming episodes. And then obviously he ends with the I've been sent to help her, she's going to need it, and then dramatic zoom and electrical interference outside, which to me just implies what he was saying is true, that there are other people in this motel room with them, because the electrical interference is how all kind of dimensional shifts have manifested in previous episodes.
Yeah, and like that when that sort of interference comes, I wonder if that's like another person like BB-8 is in the room as well, and they're also sensing the others in the room. Maybe when there's a connection through that sense, that's when there's an interference. Because you'd imagine everywhere you go, there would be people. Everywhere you go, right? There would be people everywhere in every dimension. So it's not like it's like the lights aren't always flickering. So there must be some connection being made between them,
Yeah, and I think it's telling that it's not always the same person as well. So Buck, when Rachel turned up in Buck's house, he was able to sense her, and I think that's the connections are not always as obvious or black and white as it is a version of you in another dimension, which is interesting in and of itself.
Exactly. Righto. Well, that's us done with the episode. Do you want to get into the round-up?
Yeah, let's do it.
Internet Movie Database rating, 8.4.
Okay.
8.4, which actually puts it a little bit higher than most of the episodes from Season 1, even though we're back in the same universe.
Yeah. I think this is one of the few times in this show where I think I would actually rate it slightly higher than the IMDb rating. I think the emotiveness of this episode, I think the way it was shot, I think the way they were able to take us on through what is essentially a eulogy of Jesse's character and his relationship with the others was really beautiful. And although it doesn't really move the plot forward in any really significant way, I thought it was actually a really nice change of pace to have something like this that's just a kind of almost, it's not really a character study because there's not that much characterization that goes on, but it's really just an opportunity to sit with these characters that we've been with for, I guess, the whole of the first season and then a couple of hours this season as well. So not an insignificant amount of time before one of them leaves the show. And I really enjoyed it. I think it's not a particularly dynamic episode, but it definitely worked for me. So I would say at least an 8.5 for this in terms of achieving what it set out to.
I agree with you, and it also maybe if this episode came in episode 3 of season 1, it wouldn't be an 8.5, but it's because we've been on the journey with these characters to this point as well. Yeah. Sort of culmination of Jesse's story and stuff. Okay, you said before we started that you didn't really have any theories coming out of this episode, so we might have to just go straight to the questions, but what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, there's not really anything apart from, I guess, broadly what we've talked about with Kareem and Ilyas's differing characterization. That's not really an explicit theory in The Matrix, because it's more just like, there's something going on there. Mm-hmm. But yeah, apart from that, as I say, not the most dynamic of episodes, not a lot of fodder for theories, but I'm sure when we get back to the San Francisco stuff, there'll be plenty to sink our teeth into.
Right, okay, so I'm just going to get you to do one theory, right?
All right.
Are they going to go to Treasure Island this season?
I mean, they're in California. They've got to. They're just like, they're round the corner from San Francisco at this point. Like, it would be crazy for them not to.
I mean, you say that. Whenever I flew from Los Angeles to San Francisco, it was still like a 4-hour flight.
Yeah. I mean, it's easy to forget that like America is quite big. California is not small. But in term, relatively speaking, San Francisco's around the corner. They can pop to San Francisco from wherever they are. They'll be there in half an hour. So, I think they wouldn't have had them travel to California if they weren't going to have them end up in San Francisco. It'd be crazy.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
Maybe they'll just go to Vegas. There'll be like an Ocean's 11 style heist sequence.
Well, they said they were near Reno, didn't they? So it's kind of. I'm going to ask you a question now, which the listeners who've seen the whole show will be probably like, "Why the hell are you asking that?" People who haven't seen it will probably think, "Are you giving something away?"
Okay.
But we've got 2 episodes to go after this, so I'm just gonna. Who cares? I'm just gonna ask you a random question.
Okay.
Do you think that there'll be some involvement with the fact that if they do go to San Francisco Treasure Island, will there be some sort of involvement in the Michelle in the second dimension missing a storyline with Buck also being in the same spot? Do you think there's something going on in terms of that? Do you think there could be some sort of Buck stuff at the end of the season?
So I was thinking about this actually, where Michelle might be, because I think it's really telling that we just haven't seen Michelle at all this season, and we're running out of time.
Well, that's why I asked the question. Yeah,
and we're running out of time to see her. So I'm gonna shoot from the hip with this, and I'm gonna say I think Michelle is in Treasure Island, and I think that they will travel to maybe that's why it's not safe for them, actually. I wonder. So I think they will travel into their selves in and around Treasure Island, and I think Buck will travel into Michelle's body, and that her body is in Treasure Island at the moment, and she's been detained under the same kind of pretenses that Pierre Ruskin has kind of worked with Hap to detain Prairie and the other travelers.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's where I see that going.
When you said there they could be in Treasure Island, and that's and that could be why it's not safe for them to go. Yes, no, I'm not giving any answers here, nothing like that. But I'd love you to think about that while before you watch the next episode. And I can't even remember in the next episode if you find out anything about anything. But just like, I think that's a cool idea, and I think you might be along a line of thought there that you could explore a little. The idea, like, something about Treasure Island and why they wouldn't be able to go. I'm not saying that there's anything involved there, but it's just a cool. I'd like to see where your brain goes with that.
Yeah, okay, I'll give that some more thought, because that was kind of playing on my mind this whole episode. This idea that only BB-8 can go. And it's like, well, we haven't seen any of them for that matter. But I don't think it's that they're dead, because if they were dead, they wouldn't be able to travel to that dimension. I don't think there's any way that they could go, as evidenced by Elodie keeping herself alive, so that she's got kind of a point, a bus stop to return to in that dimension if she wants to go back to it. Yeah. So it must be that the characters are in some kind of peril, which being imprisoned in a corrupt psychiatric facility certainly fits the bill for. But yeah, I'll try and unpack that a bit more and see if I can come up with anything else that might flesh that out.
All right, awesome. Okay, do you want to get into the questions? Then we've got a couple.
Yeah, let's do it.
A stranger from the outside.
All right, guys, make sure you leave a comment underneath if you want to ask Konrad a question. Underneath the pinned comment, we will ask them to him. I've got 4 today, so Ooh. I'll start off with the most important one. Let's be honest.
Okay.
From Abchiri, and it says, "What is a house?"
It's a place, to quote French. Honestly, when he was asked that question, I was like, "Come on, French, you can do better than this."
Yeah,
like,
you could say something.
Yeah, I know it sounds like a trick question, but like, come on, like play the game. A house is a space in which things live, and as far as I can tell, there's no difference between a house, a clinic, a hospital, or anything else that Ilias mentioned. It's just a space for people to travel. The real the interesting thing to me is like the use of the word house. Very, very explicitly in my mind evokes images of the green house with the rose window at the top of it. And this idea that kind of different spirits, or that there is a way to kind of that yourself is projected outwards across dimensions in the same place, and in something like Prairie's house in the original dimension, it's on a fairly small scale. I guess there's probably some spirits. I'm going to call them spirits, even though I'm not particularly religious, but it's just an easy word to use. But don't read too much into that. But it inhabit that place. But something like the greenhouse seems like almost like a confluence of spaces that like multiple kind of spaces exist within it at once. So it's almost like, I don't know, the King's Cross station for the Harry Potter fans out there, of the multi-dimensional world of travel, where it's just it's a bloody nightmare. Like there's beings just flitting all over the place. So I think like that's kind of, when I think of what Ilias is talking about as a house, it makes me think more of the greenhouse, in that it is a place of gathering for different things that are projecting themselves across dimensions, and makes it easy for you to travel between them, I guess.
Yeah, I think that drawing that comparison there is obviously, it's really, really good, I think. And most people are like, "What is a house?" It sounds like it was a off the cuff question, which is like, "Well, come on, French, you know what a house is." But yeah, like the fact, like a house does play.
You're going to college, French. Like, come on, you need. I know your essay was on bees, but like you need to do a bit better than this.
It wasn't on bees.
Canonically, it was on bees. All right.
Yeah, exactly. It was on bees.
Wasn't it on CPR?
I think it was on bees first aid. CPR on bees. Like.
No, I think it was on I'm just thinking it ties back into him giving CPR to Jesse.
Yeah,
it's all connected. All connected.
Yeah, it's all connected. All right. So next question from Bill Ross says, for both, I guess the first question would be: is Ilias the brother who Old Knight referred to? I think we both agree. Yeah.
Yeah, he's got to be. He's got to be.
Yeah. Next question: if Ilias is always brother or helper, why was he at Prairie's house when he met French, and what was he trying to do?
Yeah, so that is a good question. I mean, I think he's like, it's hard because we don't know what's going on in that space. Maybe it's less the literal geographical space and more the interconnectivity of places that mean something to someone. So like Prairie, when she's in the greenhouse, which is like this sort of confluence or like railway station with these paths branching off it to different places, she is able to project herself out to places of meaning to her, like her house in the original world, or the mine, I guess, is probably another one. And he was there in some way communing, maybe even speaking to her through something else. I think that's probably what he was trying to do. I don't think he's interested, or in fact maybe he's looking for where she went. If he can find her, projecting herself outwards from the dimension she's currently in, he's able to find out where she is and then maybe go there to help her, or I guess he wouldn't go there to help her actually, because Kareem's already there, but he would have a better understanding of how to help her in this dimension. So I think that's probably what he was doing, kind of like tracking down where she'd gone.
Mm-hmm. Okay, fair enough. Next question from Always the Foreigner. What do you think will be Amy's reaction when she gets home and to find Steve's hair clogging the sink?
Yeah, I know, like Steve, like I've had words on this show before about Steve and how he behaves in other people's homes. So he goes to the church, he tries to drink milk, or it might have been milk or juice, I can't remember which one it was, but straight out of the carton, which I was immediately like, milk, Steve, get fucked. Like, that is outrageous to do that in someone else's house. Then he goes to Amy's house, seemingly steals a jacket. I don't know who that belonged to. Left a young boy's body on the beach, and then just shaved his head in her basin, and just left hair all over the bathroom. It's outrageous. It's not. I mean, her reaction is going to be, who came back to shave their head in this bathroom? Like, they ran off with my car, but one of them returned to shave their head in the bathroom. Or maybe Uncle Carl has made a recovery and he's he shaved himself.
Yeah, we went straight back to lying down. Okay, so on a more serious note, do you think Steve will be able to reunite with the others before they send BB-8, or will this be another dangling plot?
No, I think they have to. I think there has to be. I think the way this season is going to end, there's got to be some kind of big reunion between all of the boys and BB-8 and the OA. If only very briefly, but I think that will be the last thing we see of any of them.
Okay. Lovely. Last question from Milos Vitten. Satnam, guys. Another interesting episode. Question / questions for my dear Konrad, please. I would like him to contemplate a little bit more on worthiness. Does he expect anybody by the end of the season to be worthy, and how would it be manifested?
I think Prairie is, by virtue of how she has traversed the greenhouse and the rose window, really without incident. Certainly when you compare it to Kareem, who was placed into peril. I think looking at how we've discussed in this episode the different characterizations of Ilyas and Kareem, and indeed the different presentations and how they're shot and how they're lit, I think the fact that Kareem was found to be unworthy, based on how the house responded to him, makes me think that what I was saying about Ilyas's kind of base character is probably true. Not that he's inherently a bad person, but that he's willing to do, or a bad being, but that he's willing to do bad things to achieve his goals. And that Kareem has that inside of him, though it's slightly suppressed at the moment by the human Kareem Washington, who is a good person, but will eventually be perhaps overcome by the other being within him. So I think, in terms of the actual concept of worthiness, it's a really interesting word that they use there, because it implies a certain moralism or moral relativism that the show hasn't really dealt in before, and hasn't mentioned again here. Although, I mean, it's probably a bit of a boring answer, but I wonder if it is a kind of a traditional moral code as we know it. Like kindness and empathy,
like King Arthur pulling the sword out of the stone. He
was
worthy.
Like I wonder if it is going to be. Because that would be like an easy answer, but it's not necessarily a bad answer to just be like, no, you have to be a good person in order to be considered worthy. Though that, having said that, I don't know if that would. Prairie seems quite special in that she is able to traverse it where pretty much everyone else, it seems, has failed. So that doesn't seem like it would be unique to her.
Okay.
So maybe the worthiness means something else. It maybe in terms of, like, I don't know, the position they occupy in the multiverse hierarchy. But it's so broad that it's hard to say at the moment. But I'll be interested to see if anyone else can traverse that rose window. I wonder if we'll find that out by the end of the season, actually.
Okay, so Milos actually goes on to say here, Konrad fairly quickly went over the beyond the rose window part. So what realization does he think is beyond what will be yielded? Is it about like what the OA really is, or is it possibly something more broad? What do you think actually the realization is?
So I think she's already gone. My interpretation of it from last episode was that she'd already gone beyond the rose window when she ended up
I think Milos is sort of implying. Like it mentioned, I think the architect talking about when they were talking about that sort of thing, it mentioned making it to the rose window in the house. So I think Milos has taken that very literally, meaning you have to get to the window and look through it.
Yes, okay. So I guess the tree, like Prairie finding herself in like the root of the in the roots of those trees, is not beyond the rose window then, which does make sense. Because I feel like actually
it's like a special thing for Prairie, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I feel like maybe seeing the rose window and traversing it is a more of a kind of climactic moment than I initially gave it credit for. So in terms of what it'll look like, she's had this hint from this sort of tree sequence that the multiverse is nothing but this like interconnected series of plants that want to preserve the canopy by protecting each other. Going beyond the rose window, I guess, is maybe going to give her more of that like holistic view. So she's kind of where we see from her perspective, she is like in the roots of one particular tree, and the camera zooms out to show that she is essentially in a forest, even if she can't perceive it that way. And maybe traversing the rose window is going to broaden her mind to the point where she is able to kind of view the entirety of this web of interconnected roots that make up the multiverse, and traverse it as she wishes. Maybe give her a glimpse into what Elodie is able to do. I think that's probably what I expect it to be, but it could be anything at this point. And I have this niggling thought in the back of my mind that I don't think we're ever going to see it because they've got 2 episodes left.
Okay, well, all I'm going to say is this is a real bait thing to say.
Go on, bait me.
But I have got permission. I've got carte blanche. I've got permission. I think that what is through the rose window. Now, I'm not going to say whether we see it or not. I'm just saying I think it is literally like it is actually, as Milos is sort of saying here. I think it is like what the OA is, Yeah. So we'll revisit that when we get there. But whether or not we see through it or not, whether it's implied what's through it, that's my understanding is what the OA is. Okay.
That's an interesting thought as well. That the truth of her her being is revealed to her.
Exactly. Right. Let's get into the. What are we doing? What am I doing? We don't have anything else. This is the end of the episode.
We're done. We've reached the end. Well, much like Jesse, we didn't see it coming, and now it's here. Yeah. And it's like, well,
I was expecting another segment. Let's get into a what the dub.
Perfect.
Yeah. All right, Konrad. Thanks very much for joining me. Any final thoughts before we close out here?
I can't really wait to see where the show ends now. It's set up on a knife edge at the moment to see where it's all going, and I can't wait for you guys to join me in seeing all of my theories proved either inconclusive or wrong.
Okay, lovely. I'm looking for that too. I'm really looking forward to the theory matrix and see your total for this one, because obviously we'll have a lot orange.
There's going to be a lot of orange on there, I think.
Okay, right guys, thanks very much. If you want to subscribe to the Culture Cave, do so. There's a little red button there. You click, ring the bell. Ding. Also, could you please send us an email, adpodmail, if you want to ask us a question, send us a message, tell us we need to improve something. It's happened a couple of times. and we do try our best to improve it. If you want to leave a comment down there for Konrad, do so. Subscribe on audio apps if you'd like to. T-shirt link in the description. That's a good way to support the channel. We also have a Discord. Join that. Lots of good discussion going on there. Thanks very much for joining us, guys, and we'll see you next time. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Thank you for listening. The After Dark podcast has been a Culture Cave production. Please subscribe on audio apps as well as on YouTube at The Culture Cave. Join us next week as Konrad journeys further into the unknown.